We begin this morning, though, with the effort to get more Americans vaccinated against COVID-19 as the number of deaths from the virus remains dangerously high.
President Biden is back at the White House this morning after traveling to Illinois yesterday, calling on private companies to mandate vaccines for employees. He said at first he didn't want to push mandates, but now they're proving effective in the workplace.
Look, I know the vaccination requirements are tough medicine. Unpopular with some, politics for others, but they're life-saving. They're game-changing for our country. We're in a position to leap forward in a way that we haven't for a long, long time economically. Businesses have more power than ever before to change the arc of this pandemic and save lives and protect and grow our economy. So as president, I'm going to continue to do everything I can to get us out of this pandemic.
The president's remarks come as parents anxiously wait to see when younger kids can get the vaccine. Regulators have agreed to tentatively meet on October 26th. That's when they discuss emergency use authorization of the Pfizer vaccine for kids between the ages of 5 and 11, which means it's possible it could be approved as early as Halloween. NBC News health and medical reporter Erica Edwards joins us now for more on this. So, Erica, let's start with the possibility of a COVID vaccine for kids as young as 5. How significant would that be in the fight against COVID? And do you see the FDA approving this quickly?
Hey, Joe, good morning. Well, it would be quite significant. It would be the first COVID-19 vaccine available for kids under age 12 in this country. Now, the FDA and CDC have generally worked pretty quickly to get shots in arms soon after their advisory committees have voted for them. But, you know, I've watched a lot of these meetings by now, and especially when it comes to children, there was a lot of debate. There was a lot of intense scrutiny of the data. Now, the other question is, will parents actually get their kids the shots? There was a survey released recently that found just about a third said they would get the shots for their kids right away. Another third were going to take sort of a wait and see approach. Meanwhile, Joe, there have been nearly 6 million children diagnosed with COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic.
So, Erica, we just heard from the president about vaccine mandates at businesses. A mandate went into effect today for at-home health care aides in New York. Employees are already bracing for possible staff shortages. Some of these workers might quit instead of getting vaccinated. How much would this affect care in New York? And I ask that because when a similar mandate went into effect for hospital workers in New York, the governor was prepared to call in the National Guard to fill in any gaps, but that maybe wouldn't necessarily work in this case, would it?
You're exactly right. Well, that's because home health care workers are highly specially trained. I mean, and quite frankly, patients want to stick with their aides who they feel comfortable with. That's because these workers tend to help patients with daily tasks, such as dressing and bathing. They are not easily substituted with National Guard members. Now, as you said, there is a potential shortage for these home health care workers in the state of New York who by today were required to get at least that first dose of a COVID-19 shot. I've seen estimates that only just about 70% of workers would qualify. Joe?
And Erica, let's look overseas. Finland has become the latest country to pause the use of the Moderna vaccine for younger males because of a rare cardiovascular side effect. Denmark and Sweden have also paused Moderna. How much of a concern is this? Any chance it could be paused at all in the U.S. as well?
Well, certainly a possibility. You remember that we paused the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca clinical trials briefly. Meanwhile, you know, federal health officials say that they are actively monitoring for these cases. Myocarditis, that's when the heart muscle becomes inflamed, and pericarditis, which is when the outer lining of the heart becomes inflamed. Mostly it's been reported among young males about a week or so after they received one of the mRNA vaccines, either Pfizer or Moderna. The reassuring news here is that most patients tend to recover quickly after treatment. They feel better pretty quickly, but still doctors say that, you know, especially young men, after they get one of those vaccines, really do need to pay attention for symptoms. That includes shortness of breath, any sort of unusual chest pain, and like a rapid fluttering of the heart. Joe?
All right, Erica Edwards, lots to cover this morning. Thanks so much.
Let's now bring in our friend, NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Natalie Azar for more. Dr. Azar, good morning. So what does Pfizer have to show to the FDA to get approved for the emergency use authorization? Tell us what they've been able to find out to make sure this is safe. And how would the approval change the way schools are functioning in the COVID era, given that this would still be emergency use? It's not that full authorization.
Right. So just, to get to the second part first, I don't think we're going to see a mandate until it's fully approved for schools. I just think that's just not going to happen. I don't think the country has quite an appetite for that. Right now, you may recall about a week and a half ago when Pfizer released its data, and they basically reported that the vaccination was safe, well tolerated, and effective in terms of its immunogenicity. That is, the vaccine was able to elicit an immune response that was comparable to that seen in adults. We already heard from them at that point that there wasn't enough data to actually give us an efficacy or effectiveness number because there weren't enough cases of COVID-19 in the two groups, the placebo and the vaccine group. And remember, Savannah, the trial, the approval is essentially being based on data from only around 2,000 kids. So I think this is important for people to keep in mind. Erica was just talking about the issue of myocarditis. That was not a side effect that was seen until millions of vaccines had been administered after approval or authorization when there's such a massive rollout. So I think the FDA has a really, really challenging task at hand. Remember, kids, although they do get sick, and I always want to stress that they are not completely benign, it's not a benign illness in them necessarily, the bar for safety has to be so much higher in this younger age group. And I think they're really going to be dissecting the data that they do have to make sure that when they do give the go-ahead, that the benefit clearly outweighs any potential risk.
The bar for safety has to be much higher. That's a really good point. Another question for you on Pfizer. Two new studies that are coming out of Qatar and Israel are showing that the efficacy of the Pfizer COVID vaccine drops just 2 months after getting the shot. But that doesn't mean it's all bad news. Protection against severe illness and hospitalization remained above 90%. Does this new data indicate new surges are possible in the U.S. if that efficacy drops and so many people got Pfizer? And could studies like these change the FDA's recommendation to have boosters potentially rolled out for all Americans instead of just that 65-plus group now?
So here is the problem, Savannah. When we get studies like this, and the Israel data was just numbers data. It was just antibodies waning. Qatar actually had real world data that showed that infection rates did increase a certain time period after you got your shot. This is what I want people to understand. Neutralizing antibodies, the stuff that we talk about, the stuff that people want measured, the numbers that we're following, those go down. They go down after every vaccination. I will point out that they are a little bit more durable with MMR for whatever reason, but the neutralizing antibody protects us only against infection, meaning that if you are exposed and you have a lot of neutralizing antibody, you're less likely to get infected. They don't necessarily protect against disease, and disease meaning that's landing you in the hospital. That is the thing that kills you. That your protection is coming from that other part of the immune system, T cells, B cells, all that stuff that we've talked about. But here's my point. I'm evolving a little bit on this in terms of boosters because the concern is that, okay, so you have a mild infection. Is that such a big deal? Not to you personally, but maybe at a population level it is. Number one, because you can infect people who can get very sick. And number two, every time the virus has the opportunity to spread, it has the opportunity to mutate. But again, I'm back to this thing. Are we really carpet bombing this virus? It's going to be here. And I think we just have to see where that steady state is, that we have just enough protection that we're not, feeding into variants, but we're not like over vaccinating for protection against the sniffles. Yeah. And I don't have the answer to that yet, but that's what I'm sort of like, waiting to figure out.
All right. We will be waiting to hear from you once you figure that out, because that is exactly why we have you here. Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you so much. Always great to see you. Happy Friday.
The battle over mask mandates inside classrooms is raging in Tennessee. For proof, look no further than the fight in Knox County, which just took another turn. A federal judge has ruled students will once again be required to wear masks indoors, reversing a policy made by the school board, which initially made masks optional. The decision has divided the community. The school district has more than 60,000 students. Some parents and students there are now saying enough is enough, while others are applauding the move. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joins us now from Knoxville, Tennessee, with the latest. So, Cal, walk us through the latest policy stance on mask requirements there in Knox County Public Schools. Why did the federal judge intervene? What does it mean for students moving forward?
For students, as of right now, they're going to be required to wear those masks with no exemptions, except for 2 cases if you're autistic or if you've had a tracheotomy. So very narrow, basically no exemptions. What happened here, and what a lot of parents feel betrayed about, parents on both sides, the school board initially said they would follow CDC recommendations for the school year and implement a mask guidance. They did that in the summer. Then in early fall, they reversed their own decision, saying they would not require any masks. A federal judge, as you said, overruled based on the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. 4 families sued, saying that their children were at a higher risk of getting sick because the coronavirus is so rampant, and the judge agreed with them. That is why there's this mask mandate in place. And as you have said, it has divided a community. You have small protests outside some schools in the county, and you have other parents, obviously, who are for the mandate. Those are very divisive issues at this time. Joe?
Yeah, and Cal, I know there have been impassioned school board meetings there. What are some of the arguments you're hearing from parents and students when it comes to the mask mandate there?
Yeah, so we went to a school board meeting on Wednesday. Over 60 people signed up to speak. It took 4 hours. I'm going to play you some sound from that. And then the third piece of sound that you'll hear is a parent who is for the mask mandate. So the first 2 pieces of sound are from that school board meeting. The third piece of sound from a mom who is for the mandate. Take a listen.
Friday will be my last day as a KCS student. You see, I believe that I have a right to a public education just as much as every other student in Knox County. But I do not see anyone standing up for me or these other students.
I actually quit my job in November because I was sick and tired of having to wear a mask and being told that I had to enforce masks on these children.
And I see family members, I see teachers, I see bus drivers, I see their family members that are passing away because it is exposed in school and passed through those people. And there's a trickle-down effect, and it's huge. And a piece of cloth is not something to argue over when you're talking about somebody's life and the effect that it can have on your family and your community.
Passions definitely inflamed. You heard there from a student who said that he could move, as well as a bus driver. To be clear, this is the minority. This is 59,000 students, so a very few minority, but as you said, inflamed passions to be sure.
I mean, Cal, let's look bigger picture. We know Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has tried to intervene on this issue of masks. He signed that executive order that says a school district that has a mask mandate, families can choose to opt out of it. That order has been blocked now in 3 different counties. Any reaction from him? What are his next steps?
So the state's attorney general says they are going to appeal it. You also have the plaintiffs that are trying to tweak basically the federal judge's motion and add some exemptions for children with disabilities. Again, I don't think anyone is really happy with the way this went. It is going to go up the courts, and we're seeing this around the country. We're seeing governors battle courts that are battling school boards, and you have confusion in the middle, and you unfortunately have a lot of students also caught in the middle, Joe.
All right, Cal Perry, thanks for your reporting. Appreciate it.
The debt ceiling crisis has been postponed. Last night, Senate Democrats convinced enough Republicans to avert economic catastrophe, but only until December. The Senate voted twice last night. First, enough Republicans had to join Democrats on a procedural motion to break the filibuster. And then, in a second vote, only Democrats supported raising the debt ceiling. The vote now goes to the House before it heads to the president's desk. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us this morning. Ali, good morning. So Democrats were united in their votes last night, but Republicans were not. Tell us what happened. What did we miss overnight? What happened with this debt ceiling standoff?
Yeah, not surprising that Democrats stayed united on this. Chuck Schumer, was leader of the Democrats, had been saying consistently Democrats were fine to move forward on the debt ceiling by themselves if only Republicans would let them. That is ultimately what happened last night. 11 Republicans allowed Democrats to move on to the vote to actually raise the debt ceiling. You said it right. It was a procedural vote, a cloture vote that avoided the filibuster. That's why they needed 60 votes total. In the end, they got 61 because 11 Republicans chose to join with Democrats to move forward on this. Democrats then voted separately on their own to actually raise the debt ceiling by $480 billion. That gets us to around December 3rd, which means we're going to get another bite at this debt ceiling apple. It's also going to come along at the same time as government funding runs out. Also at the same time as Democrats are going to try to go through on that larger infrastructure agenda that they've been talking about over the last few weeks. So we've got a very busy pre-holiday season. But among Republicans, dissension in the ranks over how this played out We know that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell came to Democrats. He helped broker this deal. But this is how Ted Cruz says it played out. Listen.
Chuck Schumer won this game of chicken. As two trucks drove towards each other on a country road, one or the other was going to turn, or you were going to have a lot of dead chickens. I wish Republicans hadn't blinked. We shouldn't have done that.
And again, that's the Trump line on this. He's using words like folded when he describes what Senator Mitch McConnell did here by going forward and making a deal. There are other Republican senators who have also spoken critically of this move by Republican leadership. At the same time, though, this is where we are. And again, we're going to get to do this all again in a few weeks.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you said around December 3rd, both of these crises have only been delayed, the government shutdown and the debt ceiling. They haven't been fixed. You've been so good about just breaking down what this really means, essentially the country's credit card bill. So if it was just pushed to December, what's going to happen then?
It's a great question. What Mitch McConnell says is that he allowed Democrats this extension of time because he wants them to do this process through reconciliation. That's the budget measure that they're also trying to use for the Build Back Better agenda, that larger multi-trillion-dollar social infrastructure package. They can do that separately. It's not the same reconciliation bill, but they're not going to do it in terms of the debt ceiling. McConnell is saying that that's how he wants it, but Democrats that I've spoken to, all of them, nearly to a T, have said there is no way that we're doing this through reconciliation. Not just because it's a long and cumbersome process, although it is and it can be, but also because that's just not the way that they want to move forward on this. So again, we're going to see these same arguments start to play out in a few weeks. But for now, the U.S. line of credit remains solvent.
And Allie, before I let you go, I do want to ask about the January 6th investigation. The House Select Committee investigating the insurrection has issued more subpoenas. It comes at the same time 4 Trump associates were supposed to meet their subpoena deadline. Who else is being called to testify, and what's the latest here?
So 3 new subpoenas yesterday, Savannah. These were associated with the Stop the Steal rally that was supposed to be at the U.S. Capitol. They got the guys who were permitting for that event, as well as Stop the Steal LLC. This comes after we saw roughly 11 subpoenas issued to people who were involved with the rally over at the Ellipse, that initial rally where we saw people like former President Donald Trump, as well as others, speak before that onslaught at the U.S. Capitol. What this does is it starts to paint a picture here of the way that the committee is starting to look at the specific day of January 6th. They're starting to get the organizers who were involved with these rallies, in addition to those 4 larger subpoenas, the names that your audience, I know everyone is very dialed in, but the names that your audience will really know, people like Mark Meadows, Steve Bannon, Dan Scavino, people who have been in the president's orbit for a long time. They missed their documents deadline yesterday. Their deposition deadlines come next week. They're probably going to miss those too, because we know that the former president is pressuring them not to comply. The committee has said that they can move forward with things like criminal complaint requests, trying to further enforce the subpoena requests. But this is going to end up in a legal battle.
All right. Allie Vitale, always with a lot to cover. Quite a busy week. Thank you so much for being up with us this morning.
This morning, new developments in that unfolding environmental disaster in Southern California. We're now getting our first look at a splintered underwater pipeline which caused that massive spill off the coast.
That's right. And now authorities warn the ripple effects from the spill could last months, even years. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is in Huntington Beach, California, with the latest.
The first images of the splintered pipeline, captured 80 feet underwater, reveal the more than foot-long gash where oil gushed into the Pacific. Authorities now say they're inspecting the 41-year-old pipe, which runs from this oil rig to shore, for signs of corrosion and pressure problems. But for now, many believe the pipe was likely hit by a 30-ton anchor like this one.
The fact that the pipeline appears to have been dragged leads me to conclude that it probably was caught on the ship's anchor.
Reviewing satellite imagery in the hours before and after the spill, the Coast Guard will likely be able to pinpoint which cargo ships were anchored in the area, a jammed shipping lane dotted with a maze of drilling platforms.
As long as you have shipping and offshore oil development operating in close proximity, this is the kind of accident and spill that you can expect to have happen.
With so much focus on the investigation, the true disaster is unfolding out here at sea. These booms can only hold back so much oil. which is quickly moving through this fragile ecosystem.
With more wildlife and pristine miles of beaches stained from this massive spill, the search for answers and the probe to hold someone responsible.
As the investigation progresses, the amount of crude that has spilled into the ocean has changed. Officials say at least 44,000 gallons have poured into the Pacific, but that number may also be as high as 144,000. Joe and Savannah, back to you guys.
All right, thanks, Miguel. And let's now get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Bill Cairns joins us on this Friday morning. Bill, good morning.
How are ships able to anchor where there's pipes under the ground? I don't get it.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. I know. Oh, well. So let's get into this. And our other story that we're going to develop over this upcoming weekend is the possibility of tropical development off the southeast coast. This will be not a huge tropical system, even if it becomes one, but it could become a tropical depression. So we are watching areas of heavy rain this morning. Yesterday, we had a horrific flooding in Alabama with the fatality of that child in the flash floods. Today, we've been seeing flash flooding in areas of southern portions of Georgia. Torrential rain with these thunderstorms has been moving, and it's all trying to slide towards Savannah this morning. So we'll have to watch out for any developing stories with that. You see that area of maroon down there near Eastman. That's already reported up to 6 to 8 inches of rain. So if there's flash flooding going on, that's where it's occurring. Atlanta was just dropped from your flash flood watch, so the heaviest rains will slowly be moving out. And as far as tropical development goes, a 30% chance. So earlier in the week, it was 10%. Now we're up to 30%. If this does develop, it'll be right off the coastline of South Carolina or North Carolina, especially over the Outer Banks area. And again, that would most likely be Saturday into Sunday. So if anyone has plans from Wilmington northwards through Cape Hatteras, even including the Norfolk area, Saturday looks pretty rough. It looks kind of windy. It looks rainy. And again, not going to be like a hurricane, but it will ruin your plans for your Saturday. And then Sunday, guys, all of that mess heads up towards New York City. So we'll talk more about the weekend forecast next hour.
All right.
That's always quite the tease. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.